Hello and welcome back. Today we are here with the truly outstanding Rich Roll. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you went from one end of the spectrum to the other. You have such an incredible story, and I really want to dive into it. You're a one-of-a-kind endurance athlete. You were named one of the 25 fittest men in the world by Men's Fitness magazine. You have an extremely successful podcast called the Rich Roll Podcast, and the author of the book, Finding Ultra.
Ta-da.
And it's also on Audible, which is how I listen to it. That's why it's in perfect condition. However, your life wasn't always this successful and joyous. You went from being top of your class in high school, getting into all of the Ivy League schools, including Harvard, to becoming addicted to alcohol, being cut off from your family, and working in a career you had zero passion and drive for. Then on to becoming one of the fittest men in the world, having a family, and ultimately finding your true calling.
Beautifully. I wish I had written that.
Thank you. So let's dive into this epic journey of you thus far. Please walk us through your journey from how you went from such an academic success to becoming an alcoholic and experiencing your life collapse around you.
The truth of the matter is I can't point my finger and blame anyone else other than myself. I grew up in a loving household. My parents are still married. All my needs were met. We grew up middle class, and then when I was in my later years in high school, my dad got a fancy job, and then we were doing very well. So it's not like I struggled in terms of having my needs met or anything like that, or we grew up in a nuclear family, but I was always one of those people that just felt apart from everyone else. In 12-step, they call it feeling like everybody else has the rule book for life but you. And I had a lot of difficulty trying to connect with other people, making friends, and I was very much a loner. I was the kid who was bullied on the playground. I had an eye patch over one eye and the headgear, like not exactly a vision for you, and really struggled to find anything that I could connect with until I found swimming. When I discovered swimming, it was something that I was naturally good at, not amazing at, but good enough that it lured me into that world. And that became my life throughout junior high school and high school, and I became pretty good at that. And I had struggled academically as a young person, but the kind of diligence and grit that I learned in the swimming pool translated into my academics, and I was able to do well in school, and as you mentioned, get into all the fancy schools and all of that. But really had this like hole in my spirit where I just really felt confused most of the time. And when I went 3,000 miles away from where I grew up in Washington, D.C. to California to go to college, the floodgates opened up. I discovered partying, and that quickly became the most important thing to me. My line of vision became, where's my next good time? And I would say that it was fun. It brought me out of my shell. In many ways, it taught me how to be a social person. And I'll never forget the first time that I got drunk. It was like this sensation of a warm blanket being wrapped around me, telling me everything was going to be okay. And suddenly I was able to look somebody in the eye and carry on a conversation and talk to girls and crack a joke. And it was great. It was like the solution to every problem that I really didn't know that I even had. And so that was it for me. And I just went deeper and deeper into that. And it's not an overnight thing. It's a very gradual, progressive thing, alcoholism. So it took quite a long period of time before it caught up to me and started to really denigrate the trajectory of my life. But the indicia were there from the beginning. Like I knew from the outset that my relationship with alcohol was different from that of my peers. I was the last guy to leave the party, and that translated many years later into drinking alone and going to bars by myself, all the way to the point of starting my day with a vodka tonic in the shower and sneaking drinks throughout the day at my job, and ending up most nights in a blackout and not knowing where my car was, and all the drama that is part and parcel of the practicing alcoholic, until at the end I was very much a broken human being. I was isolated from people. My family didn't want anything to do with me. I lost a lot of friendships. I was on the precipice of losing my job and looking at jail time for multiple DUIs. Like, it was a disaster. And still, I didn't want to let it go.
Yeah.
Like it was, you know, that's the insanity of
security.
addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah.
Until one day, you know, I had that moment of clarity that you hear about and realized like I can't live this way anymore. And I ended up in a rehab in Oregon where I lived for 100 days, which is a pretty long time to be sort of incarcerated in what is essentially a mental institution, and having this dawning realization, thinking I'm this smart person, this intellectual being, and yet my best thinking had me, you know, literally in this place that I never thought I would end up.
What do you think was the underlying cause that led you to depression, low self-esteem?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really difficult question to get absolute clarity on, but I think that I had unhealed emotional trauma from childhood, and I was sort of set on a trajectory towards achievement in a household that prioritized education and accomplishment in a very overt way, and I sort of happily jumped on that bandwagon. But in retrospect, looking back on that, you know, I don't think that it was the best way for me to live. Like I was always kind of a sensitive kid, like an artistic kid. You know, being some kind of high-powered lawyer really, you know, was like trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. But that was the game that I was trying to play, and I played it well, but I played it at the cost of listening to my intuition and being authentic to who I was. And I think that created essentially an existential crisis that I didn't fully begin to wrestle with until I was in my late 30s, trying to understand, like, why am I living this life that really doesn't fuel me, doesn't get me excited about getting out of bed in the morning. And I think that contributed to a whole battery of, you know, emotional dilemmas that I've spent the last 2 decades trying to, you know, untie and heal.
It's made you so relatable, though. I mean, I think it's probably one of the main reasons you're living your purpose too, because you were just like, screw this, I'm so tired of being unhappy. And then you're so relatable with your podcast, and I feel like you really touch a lot of people because you are so honest with your struggles, and everybody goes through struggles. So maybe it was, you know, a huge blessing that you had to go through that.
Oh yeah, of
You're
course.
so
I mean,
strong.
you look back in retrospect, and everything looks like it lined up perfectly. You know, it doesn't feel that way in the moment. But honesty and vulnerability and authenticity are things that I've learned in the recovery community and the 12-step community. And to me, I don't really think about it that much. It's just the way that I am. But I'm very conscious of the fact that by being open and honest and, you know, about my weaknesses and my struggles, you know, to this day, I don't have it all figured out, is what allows people to kind of get on board and connect. And when I was writing Finding Ultra, it was the same thing. At the same time I was writing this book, Scott Jurek, who's the world's greatest ultramarathoner, was writing his memoir, and he's a vegan athlete. You know, it's like, and I had this moment of thinking, like, why would anyone read my book? Why, you know, just read Scott's book. He's the champion. Like, what is it that I could possibly say that could be of benefit to people? And I realized that the value of anything that I had to say was going to be directly related to the extent to which I was willing to be open and honest and about things that I'm not proud of and the struggles that I kind of underwent to get to this point.
I was just having this conversation, and we were saying how everything that you go through, you feel shameful about, right? You're like, no, I can't tell anybody about my skeletons. They'll judge me, and this is awful. But then when you share it with somebody, they're like, oh man, they did that too, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
That gives me permission to forgive myself and move on and become who I want to be. And you really do that for people. You're really that beacon. So anyway, I hope you know that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Around 39 years old, you became very unhealthy and experienced a defining moment that really scared you and started you on a journey of great change and incredible growth. Can you share what this moment was and what it was like to have fear drive you to change for the better?
Sure. So in the wake of my rehab experience, I made my way back into the world, and my singular focus was twofold: like create the most solid foundation of sobriety that I possibly could by making that my number one priority. And second to that, repairing all the relationships that I had broken as a result of my drinking and using, and becoming a responsible, upstanding member of society. And so I think what I did was I didn't necessarily quell all of my alcoholic instincts. I no longer drank or used drugs, but I poured a lot of that same energy into my professional career, as well as into unhealthy lifestyle and eating habits. So for the next 10 years, it was nose to the grindstone. I got to get back on track and prove to everybody else in the world that I can be that person that I was when I was 18 and got into all those colleges. So I went on this career trajectory of trying to become a partner in a fancy law firm here in Los Angeles, even though I couldn't stand the work that I was doing, and I didn't look, I was surrounded by a lot of successful people, but I was very aware that I didn't aspire to have any of their lives, even though they're amazing people. There's no slight against them. And I was medicating myself through like fast food and just being a lazy couch potato until fast forward, I'm 39 years old, I'm 50 pounds overweight, semi-depressed, just unenthusiastic about this life that I felt like I didn't even really consciously choose. And from an outward perspective looking in, I was successful. I had achieved those goals that I had set for myself and had a fancy car and a really nice job title and a nice office with a view and all that kind of junk. But I was dying on the inside. And it was very confusing because I'd worked so hard to get sober and felt like I was living this spiritual life. And yet I had this tremendously large blind spot that I continued to overlook, just thinking, I have to be this person. That wasn't me. Yeah. And I'd never stopped for a minute to think, what makes my heart beat? What am I excited about? What would I like to be? And what is unique about who I am that I can offer to the world? Like that wasn't part of my framework or my thinking in any respect. So the way I kind of liken it to is this existential crisis that I was having that collided with a health scare in this perfect storm moment when I was making my way up a flight of stairs after a long day of work and had tightness in my chest and had to pause halfway up a simple flight of stairs because I was winded and thinking that I was on the precipice of having some kind of heart event. Heart disease runs in my family. And it really scared me. And I realized in that moment, not only that I needed to make some pretty significant and serious lifestyle changes, but I actually had the desire, the willingness to do that. And I think I was able to have that presence of mind because that moment was so similar to the day that I decided to go to rehab and get sober. And I was very aware of the power of these kind of moments that I think visit all of us from time to time. Perhaps they pass us by because we're not in the moment and conscious of them, but because that moment of deciding to get sober had been so profound and had changed my life so dramatically in such a positive way, I had this sense when I was on that staircase, like, this is another one of those moments. Like, are you going to let it pass, or are you going to grab it and do something? And that's what I did. I grabbed it and immediately started addressing first my diet and my nutrition. And it was not an elegant overnight thing. I stumbled in the dark and, one step forward, two steps backwards for quite a while. But over time of being committed to trying to, resolve or solve this equation for myself, that's really the gestalt that has kind of led me to sitting with you here today.
Nice. You say in your book, Finding Ultra, I can say with full confidence that my rapid transformation from a middle-aged couch potato to Ultraman to, in fact, everything I've accomplished as an endurance athlete begins and ends with my Plantpower diet. So when did you become vegan, and how long after becoming vegan did you get into endurance training?
So after that staircase incident, I began looking at food. The first thing I did was a 7-day vegetable and fruit juice cleanse to detox myself. Not that I had any belief that I had toxins that needed to be removed. I just needed to do something dramatic. I needed to do a food version of what detox was like in rehab. I needed to try something hard to shut my system down and reboot it. And that 1-week experience was very successful in that. A couple days into that, I felt terrible, like you do if you were coming off heroin, on the couch, sweating, thinking you're going to die. And until day 5, day 6, and you start to feel better. And by day 7, I felt incredible. I felt so good. I'd never gone a single day in my life without eating solid food. And here I was on day 7 of this, juice only experiment. And I couldn't believe the resurgence of vitality and energy that I was experiencing. And I think the value of that experience more than anything was that it showed me this equation between what you put in your body and how you feel, which is something you're told time and time again as a young person, but you don't really get it. And I got it in that moment. And that kind of motivated me to find a way of eating, like, okay, now I got to go back to food.
But you didn't want to.
No, I didn't.
You're
I was
like,
like,
no,
the alcoholic
food.
in me is like, I'm just going to juice forever. I feel so good. Like, why should I go back? My wife's like, hey, I don't think that's so smart.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. So then it became, okay, so how do I eat and feel this good? That was really the next question that I was trying to answer. And I tried a bunch of diets. I tried, a vegetarian diet, but I kept lapsing into junk food vegetarian. Oh, if I just eat Pizza Hut pizza and I take the pepperoni off it, like I'm vegetarian, I'm healthy. And of course, 6 months of being kind of half committed to that left me back on the couch again, hadn't lost any weight, my energy levels had plummeted. And it was another bottom, essentially, where I thought, well, maybe at 40, you're just like, this is how you feel and this is the way life is. But the one thing that I hadn't tried, probably because I was afraid to try it or it just sounded so awful, was eating a 100% plant-based diet. Yeah. And I thought, I can't really go back to cheeseburgers guilt-free unless I do this one last thing. So I'll try it. I had very low expectations that it would change anything or make me feel any different. But the truth is, within about a week of eating nothing but plants close to their natural state, what I later learned was called a whole food plant-based diet, I felt amazing. And it was the closest that I had gotten to that experience of what it felt like on that 7th day of the juice cleanse. And a light switch went on and I was like, this is it. This is agreeing with me in a way that I never would have imagined. I'm a little terrified because, like, what does this mean for the rest of my life? Like, I'm only going to eat plants now? Like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And at that point, I started to educate myself to try to figure out how to do it right in a way that would be sustainable over the long haul. And that's what I've been doing for the last 12, 13 years.
Good job.
Boom.
What are Ironmans, Ultramans, and what was Epic 5?
Okay. So most people have heard of an Ironman. An Ironman is a one-day, very long triathlon. Over the course of that one day, you swim 2.4 miles, then you bike 112 miles, and you celebrate that insanity by then running a marathon, like all in one day. It's crazy. Like, widely considered the ultimate test of human endurance. Everybody's probably seen the Ironman in Hawaii on television, but there are various Ironmans in every city all over the world on any given weekend. And when I started I didn't quite fully answer your other question, which was, by adopting this whole food plant-based diet, I suddenly had all this energy, and that's what got me out the door and trying to get fit again. I was bouncing off the wall. I had so much energy. So it wasn't even a conscious choice. I was like, I need to do something with my body because I can't sit down and focus. Yeah. So I pulled an old pair of running shoes out of the closet and went back to the pool, and my wife bought me a bike for my birthday. And
so sweet.
And it was, she was trying to encourage me. Also, she's like, get out of the house. Like, you're driving me crazy. So it was all very casual. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go reinvent myself and be this endurance athlete. It was just a way of trying to connect with my physical body in a way that I hadn't in a very long time, and in a way that brought me a lot of joy as a child. I was a swimmer. I loved swimming, and it was something that I just had put into the rearview mirror and hadn't really connected with. And the more I did it, the more I realized, like, this is what I'm about. Like, this is what brings me the most happiness, like simple things that don't cost any money, like the feeling of the sun on your shoulders when you're running on a trail at dawn, or just the voice, the sound of your breath on a bicycle, or jumping into a swimming pool, like very primal, basic things. And through the course of just enjoying that with no agenda, I lost all this weight, and I just felt better and better with each week that went by, and I got really strong really quickly. And that's what led me into this idea of, like, well, maybe I should challenge myself and see what I'm capable of, because I had a lot of unfinished business as an athlete because alcoholism had really truncated my swimming career in college. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try an Ironman And I didn't realize that you have to sign up for these races like a year in advance. And I'd done a little triathlon here or there. And it was a world that I didn't know very much about. And when I realized I was going to have to wait like a year and a half to do an Ironman, I stumbled upon this race that I'd never heard of called Ultraman, which most people have never heard of because it's a very below the radar kind of non-media event.
AKA nuts.
It's nuts, yeah. So an Ultraman is essentially twice the distance of an Ironman. The World Championships of Ultraman are held in Hawaii every year on Thanksgiving weekend, and it's a 3-day stage race. The first day, you swim 6.2 miles, this point-to-point swim, and then you get on your bike and you ride your bike 90 miles. The second day, you ride your bike 171 miles. And the third day, you run a double marathon, 52.4 miles. And you circumnavigate the Big Island of Hawaii over this 3-day period. And when I read about this race, I just thought, that is the most insane thing I've ever heard. I can't believe people voluntarily sign up for something like this. It just I didn't realize human beings were capable of anything like that.
I know.
And yet, it just stuck with me. Like it lived in my conscious awareness. And I just knew deep in my awareness that I would find my way to that race. There was something about it. It wasn't just the intimidating distances. In this article that I read about it, it characterized it like this spiritual odyssey. Yes, it was a race and there were people trying to win, but more than that, it was about this collective adventure that these 35 people, it's limited to just 35 people every year, and their crews, it's a self-supported race, have over this 3-day period. The goal being that everybody, crews and athletes, have a transformative experience as a result of undergoing this rigorous adventure. And that's what I wanted for myself. I wanted a spiritual odyssey so that I could learn more about who I was and hopefully resolve this dilemma that I was still trying to figure out in my mind about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, what I wanted to express, and how I was going to live this next chapter of my life. And so I was able to participate in that race in 2008, 2009. I did quite well. I exceeded everybody's expectations. At 43, I led the race in 2009 after the first day. I was like winning by 10 minutes. I crashed my bike, lost the lead, but still was able to push my way through to the finish and end up 6th overall in the fastest American. And that's what got a bunch of media attention. People were like, who is this corporate lawyer in his mid-40s who's doing these things, and he's doing it as a vegan, he doesn't eat any animal products, and people were really interested in learning about how that possibly could be the case. And you had mentioned that I attribute my athletic success to my diet, and I really do. Like, I really think there's something about eating a plant-based diet that not just agrees with me, I'm not some crazy outlier, but I really think it is an athlete's secret weapon in that it's very anti-inflammatory, it's high in antioxidants, it's very dense in terms of micronutrients and phytonutrients. And my experience is that it's allowed me to recover more rapidly in between workouts. So an athlete gets stronger not during their training sessions, but in the periods in between. And the more you can expedite that recovery process in between your training sessions, the more gains you're able to realize in a more compressed period of time. And I really think that's why I was able to make such great leaps and advances in a relatively short period of time. So I had that success, and the following year I did this thing that you mentioned called Epic 5, where I did 5 Ironmans. The goal was to do 5 Ironmans on 5 Hawaiian islands in 5 days. So essentially doing an Ironman on each island, after which you get on an airplane, fly to the next island, wake up early the next day, and do it again. We didn't quite make it in 5 days. We had some logistical problems. It wasn't really a race. It was an adventure that this friend of mine, Jason Lester, and I
Who has one arm, by the way, right?
Jason is an extremely inspirational figure. He's somebody that I've trained with and raced with at Ultraman, who only has the functionality of one arm. He's not an amputee. His right arm is attached, but he doesn't have any control over it. So he has to prop it up on his bike, and he swims with only one arm. It's just absolutely incredible. So he did this with me as well and got it done. He's amazing.
Is he plant-based too?
He is, I don't know, I haven't talked to him in a while. I don't know where he's at with that right now, but he very much was at the time. Yeah, so we both did it plant-based.
So what are some of the endurance boosting foods that you ate for Epic 5 to just survive? And how did you replenish your electrolytes?
Mm-hmm.
Did you use gels? Like, can we talk about some of
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, I start my day every day with a very thick, dark green smoothie that's packed with everything from kale, spinach, beets are really important, beets and beet greens, which really boost your body's ability to utilize and leverage oxygen. Lots of hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, which are high in omega-3s and also are great for endurance. A lot of coconut milk and coconut water for electrolytes. On the bike and in the midst of exercising, try to keep it whole foods as much as possible. So that means lots of bananas, lots of dates, nut butters, super important too. And even baked sweet potatoes, which are almost like nature's gels, are very easy to digest, especially when you're on a bicycle. But in a competition context, I will also use gels from time to time. They're not something I eat on the daily, but that high sugar content, especially like in the latter phases of a marathon or the very end of what you're trying to accomplish, they work quite well.
How long did you train for Epic 5? You only trained 4 months. Is that correct?
I trained 4 months. Well, I was quite fit because 2008 and 2009, I had done Ultraman, and I put in huge training blocks for that. And so 2010, we did Epic 5. I took a break after the 2009 Ultraman, and then, I had 4 months to actually get ready for Epic 5. And that was more about learning how to battle sleep deprivation and just a low level of energy output over an extremely long period of time. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and train, or just figure out how to be moving all day long throughout the day. So I was just used to like a low level accelerated heart rate. Like, it's about efficiency as much as anything else. It's not about like tempo or going super hard. It's just how long can you manage to keep moving your body without falling asleep.
How many hours a day did you guys have to stay up?
It was what made that challenge the most difficult were all the logistical things that had to be managed it was almost a relief when we were actually doing the Ironmans every day because we didn't have to worry about anything else. So sleep deprivation was the major thing because we had some people helping us, but a lot of it we were doing on our own, and we wouldn't get checked into these hotels until like 2 in the morning, and we'd have to get up at 6, and so that just starts to really become a problem. So that was the hardest part, and then having like unforeseen things occur, like mechanical problems with our bikes that we had to figure out and manage, and that's an emotional thing as much as anything else. So in terms of being out there like on the course every day, it's not about like, you don't want to go too hard and too fast because you're too tired for the next day. But if you're out there too long, you're out in the heat longer and you're getting less sleep. So it was this balance. So I think we were probably on average something like 14 hours a day of doing it.
So what did Ultramans and Epic 5 do for your character and emotional growth? Because from reading your book, there were times where I was getting stressed out and anxious just from listening to your journey.
Oh, no.
I mean, no. But it was like, but I'm glad because you did such a great job in really sharing that and painting that picture for your audience. So I mean, what did it do for you? Like, you had to overcome a lot.
Well, I think there's a beautiful thing about endurance sports that makes it unique in the pantheon of sports, in that the training, not just the racing, but the preparation for these events requires so much time, and a lot of that time you're on your own and you're by yourself, and you have to go to these really deep, dark places. And when you do that, it's less about the physical and much more about the emotional and the spiritual. You're forced to confront yourself in a very profound way, and all the artifice and the masks come off, and you confront who you really are in the most stripped down, profound way.
Yeah.
I liken it to the equivalent of doing like a silent meditation retreat or something like that, where you can no longer escape, the monkey mind or these lies that you tell yourself about how you're living. And I think that connection between mind, body, and spirit is what I was lacking in my life, and it was what I was seeking. And the process of preparing for those events really allowed me to embrace that in a profound way, and has been my greatest teacher in terms of connecting me with myself so that I could live more congruently and authentically to who I am.
That's really beautiful. It's funny how God designed our bodies and our minds to be so connected that when we push one or the other has to respond in this way that surprises us.
Yeah. Well, they say you're only as sick as your secrets. And we all, as human beings, compartmentalize, right? We all have traumas or things that have happened that we kind of push into the back corners of our conscious awareness or our unconscious mind. And the longer we persist without looking at those things or dealing with them, ultimately they're always going to come out. They become malignant, and they manifest in ways that create problems. And I think a lot of people are living very incongruently in their lives, and I think that's driving this epidemic of depression and anxiety and stress. And one of my favorite quotes that's in the book is Henry David Thoreau's words: "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them." And if that was true in 1854, I think that's when he said it, it's certainly, I believe, more true today. And if my story or my example stands for anything, it's a call to action to address that incongruency and to try to resolve it in our own lives. And for me, I found authenticity through endurance sports and through the books that I write and the podcast and all the like. But everybody has their version of that. And it doesn't mean get up and walk away from your job necessarily, but it's a call to deepen that mind, body, spirit connection and to try to really connect with and understand what your impulses, your innate nature, your intuitions are telling you about who you want to be and what it is that you are here to express. Because I think we all have this divine blueprint, and we're here to grow, and we're here to express that which is most unique to who we are.
Where and when do you experience pure joy, and why? And you talk about service and gratitude being very important to you.
Well, I think it's a two-part question. I mean, the things that bring me the most joy come in different packages. I mean, just being present with my kids, like hearing my daughters laugh, like that's probably the purest joy that you're going to ever feel as a parent. But beyond that, like I said earlier, it's the simple things. It's like when I can get into that flow state on a trail, or when I'm on my bike and I'm on hour 5 or 6, and that relationship with time becomes fuzzy and I'm just super present, that is where I feel my best and am experiencing the most joy. And then in terms of how I approach my life, being service-minded and finding a way to give back whatever wisdom I've accumulated over the years is how I connect with gratitude the most. And I think it's a very simple thing. Like when you approach your life or situations, whether they be personal or professional, from a perspective of like, what am I going to get out of this? And like, who's going to do that thing for me? I think we're isolating ourselves from our fellow humans. And when you enter those situations, conversely, from a perspective of what can I give? How am I contributing? It gets you out of your own self, like the limitations of the ego and the selfishness that accompanies, being human. And when I can quell that egoic mind, then I have space for joy and gratitude.
Nice. That's beautiful. What would your advice to people who want to live and do their passions and walk in God's will for their life? What would your advice be to somebody who's not necessarily doing that now, or looking for what that is, or maybe confused about it?
I think we're in a culture right now where it's very flip to say, do what you love.
Yeah.
It's like, do what you love. Like, don't listen to the man. Like, quit your job.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know how helpful that is to people. And I think it creates shame in a lot of people because they don't know what they love, or they're not clear on what that thing might be, and they feel like they should know the answer to that, and they don't. And I think that further makes people retract. So my advice is to figure out a way to connect with yourself, whether it's through a meditation practice or daily journaling or physical exercise like I enjoy. There is a version of that mind, body, spirit connection that is suitable for you. And I think the first thing is to identify or to figure out what that is for yourself and commit yourself to that without an agenda, like without it having to be results oriented, just for the process of doing it. And I think what you will find is that you will start to, there will be these instincts that will begin to percolate up and create a little spark. And then your job is to fan that spark into a flame and then ultimately into a bonfire. And these are tiny little things. I mean, I think you really have to be integrated enough so that you're aware, like, oh, wow, like I really had fun painting that picture the other day, or I told a joke and that made me think like, maybe I should tell more jokes. Whatever, those tiny little things, those are super important to pay attention to. And again, it's not about quitting your job. It's about trying to find a way to bring a little bit more expression to those things that bring you joy without self-judgment and divorced from the judgment of others. You have to be very protective of that because everyone will have an opinion. So you don't go around telling everyone about this stuff. This is for you and you only. It's not about necessarily creating a brand new life for yourself. It's just about trying to bring a little bit more of that spirit into your day-to-day. And what I found and what I've seen in many, many other people is that when you create momentum around that, then suddenly there will be like evidence that will pop up, like little opportunities, like, hey, come over here and tell a joke over here now, or hey, we really like that picture. Would you draw something for us? Whatever that is, it can come in a multitude of different ways, but saying yes to that stuff. And then before you know it, a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you're doing more and more and more of it, and you suddenly feel more in your body and more you.
That's only somebody who's truly in their passion can really say all that stuff. I mean, that's so true.
We tend to overestimate what we can do in 6 months to a year and wildly underestimate what we can do in a decade. I started a daily journaling practice back in 1998 and have been doing it ever since. And I did it for a very long time before I started to blossom into, this person who was a little bit more integrated than he was before. And I think what happens is people commit to some new practice and they don't see immediate results and they abandon it and think it's ineffectual. So it's about embracing the process and the journey and not being about expectations and results. And the more you can be in that, ironically, the more results you'll actually get, and letting go of your timeline. It doesn't happen the way that you want it to or expect it to, and certainly not in accordance with, the calendar. So it's about the process as much as anything else.
Do you find it important to your life mission to surround yourself with individuals who believe in you and maybe cut out toxic people or habits?
Yeah, I think the company you keep is super important. I think we're in a culture right now where nobody wants to hear the truth about how they're living. I see that a lot with young people. Like, unless they're being affirmed, then they'll say, well, that's a toxic person and I'm cutting them out. But you have to have the wherewithal to have people in your life that are going to give you the solid feedback about when you're going awry.
Yeah.
So don't make that mistake. Like, surround yourself with people that want the best for you and that encourage you. And I think it really is important, the community that you keep. But make sure that you have truth tellers in your life as well, who are not going to be shy or afraid to tell you when you're making a misstep. And having the self-confidence and the groundedness to be able to hear that without being emotional about it, I think is also really important.
Very wise. I noticed throughout your book that your self-talks went from very hard and critical to very encouraging, belief-fueled. How did you go from fear to faith?
That's a hard question. Very inelegantly, I would say. I still have plenty of fears, but I've learned because I've had so many experiences of trust and faith working out, I've learned to trust that. Like I've learned, like if I know when I'm pursuing something that makes me scared, but also feels congruent with me. I've learned to trust that it will work out in some way or another, even if I'm not seeing it in the moment. And again, it may not work out the way that I want it to, but that only comes through a lot of experience. So I still have plenty of fears, but when I'm taking care of myself properly, I know that my faith is always more robust than my fear and will trump it ultimately.
Did your positive influence and lifestyle inspire your family to go vegan or plant-based?
My immediate insular family or like my extended family?
Both. Let's start with your immediate family.
Well, with my immediate family, my wife had always been much healthier than me, and I talk a lot about that in the book.
Yeah.
But once I was really committed to being plant-based and training for these races, then she became plant-based, really in solidarity with me, and we've raised all our kids plant-based.
Oh, cool.
And they're not perfect in that regard, especially as my daughters become teenagers and they want to eat what they want to eat. Like, we don't overly police all of that, but
That's healthy.
in the home, it's plant-based 100%. My wife's an amazing cook, which makes it a lot easier. In terms of my extended family, not really.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
That's always kind of challenging.
No,
they're the
no.
crazy vegans at the table.
Yeah. My mom still says, "You eat chicken, right?" Like, I was like, "I've written 3 books on this. I don't know what else. What else can I do?" I don't know.
Do you ever like
God
cook?
bless her.
Yeah, of course. Do you cook for them, or do you like bring them things, or like, hey?
Well, they live in Washington D.C., so we don't see them that often.
Okay.
But they try. They do their best. Like when we visit, then my mom, she does her best.
Do you really sleep in a tent every night, even when at home, and why?
I do sleep in a tent. I've been sleeping in a tent for a couple of years.
You're so cool.
I would say, first of all, like my wife and I have been together like 20 years. We love each other. Everyone wants to project that it's some marital, crisis happening. That is not the case at all. I've had a lot of struggles with sleep over the years. When I'm training super hard for these races, I sleep like a rock. But when I'm not like in that mode and I'm just working out like moderately, like it's very difficult for me to fall asleep. So I've had to create all of these routines to try to enhance my sleep quality. And sleeping in a tent began a couple of years ago. We have a flat roof at our house, and during the summer, we would pull mattresses out on the roof and project. We have this flat wall also. We project movies with the kids and have like a little movie party on the roof, and just sleep on the roof. And on one of those experiences, I woke up the next day feeling so refreshed. Like I had the best night of sleep. Something about the cold air and the fresh air and the being under the stars, and I just thought, I want to keep doing this. So I just left the mattress on the roof. Yeah. But then as fall came, like you wake up and everything's wet. And I was like, well, I should get a tent. And it started there. And it's just been 2 years now. So
Is it on the roof still?
No, I moved it. It was too windy up there. I moved it down to the ground. But I just sleep better, like being outdoors. And I really, really like it, especially. It's still really hot out, so as we get into fall and winter, I mean, we live in Los Angeles. It's not like I'm in New England. Like I wouldn't be doing this in New England. And I travel a lot, and I'm sleeping in hotels frequently, so it's not like 100% thing. But when I'm at home, I really do like it. So, and I have like all these other crazy things that I do. I have a gravity blanket and like.
What's a gravity blanket?
It's like this weight. When you go to the dentist and you put like the lead. When you're getting an X-ray. Yeah. It kind of feels like that. It's a very heavy blanket.
Over you?
You put it over you. Wow. Yeah. So it's a 25-pound blanket, and it was originally designed for autistic people, and they discovered that by using this blanket with autistic kids, that it would calm them down. Like it signals the nervous system that you're not under threat, and it allows you to relax. And I've had that experience with it, so I sleep great with it.
Where
I
does
highly
one get a
recommend it.
gravity
I think
blanket?
just Google gravity blanket, you can find it.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna look it up.
So yeah, I do all this weird stuff.
So do you
like
ever
that,
like
but
go inside, or does like Julie come and surprise you one night in the tent? Like, hey, Rich, you
she's
here? I want
like,
to cuddle.
she is not coming in the tent.
She's not allowed in the
No.
tent. No girls
But I
allowed.
go into the bedroom with
Oh, okay.
you know.
Are you
come
like,
on.
Julie, I miss you?
Yeah.
Sometimes
We
you're like,
have our
okay.
time together.
No, I'm not. I just want to know, like, during the night, like, are you ever like, man, I just want to be with her. Like, not sexual or anything. I mean, she's your wife, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, my question is coming from, like, do you ever just like, man, I want to hug her tonight? I
Yeah.
want to be with her
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
Or does she, like, ever miss you? Or she's like, nah, he can go sleep in the tent.
She's kind of like, he can go sleep in the tent.
Well, that's so cool. I'm so glad that you have found yourself and found your passion and you're inspiring other people.
You know, look, we're in a very interesting time right now where, you know, climate change is very real. We're seeing evidence of it every day. We're in this crazy healthcare epidemic where people are more obese than ever. They're more sick than ever. Chronic lifestyle illness is killing millions of people every year unnecessarily. And the solution lies in eating plants. When you eat a plant-based diet, you are sidestepping all of these illnesses. You're doing what's best for the planet. You're saving the lives of all of these animals that suffer unnecessarily. It checks all of the boxes. And if I can go out there and do 5 Ironmans on 5 Hawaiian islands in a week, I'm telling you that you're not sacrificing your athletic performance to eat this way and to adopt this lifestyle. And if my example, my story, and my message stands for anything, it's just that we're all sitting on top of massive amounts of untapped potential. And when you think like, well, I'm just going to resign myself to the life that I chose, it's never too late. Like I'm still at, you know, I'm almost 53 and I'm still trying to reinvent myself daily. And I think that it's important for people to understand that you can make changes. People say people don't change, and I think that's nonsense. People change all the time.
Yeah.
You all have the power out there to make the changes and to become the person that you are here to be.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Love Gianna
And Rich Roll.